Good morning, and welcome to LPC's public hearing and public meeting of August 18th, 2026. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I will turn to General Counsel Mark Silberman to call the roll.
Chair Savage,
Here?
Vice Chair Master,
Here.
Mr. Chen,
Here.
Commissioner Chu,
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Mahan,
Here.
Commissioner Wilder.
So today's public hearing and meeting is being held in person in LPC's hearing room on the second floor of 253 Broadway. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube for anyone who would like to participate remotely or watch the proceedings. Our agenda today includes a public meeting agenda for applications for work on designated properties that have already had a public hearing and for which we have already heard testimony and are back today with revisions in response to our comments at the hearing, and a public hearing agenda for new applications for work on designated properties. With that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Chair Savage, and good morning, everyone. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 26-08566, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2563, lots 23 and 25, 122, 124 Greenpoint Avenue in the Greenpoint Historic District. This is a taxpayer building and also a Beaux-Arts style firehouse built circa 1910. The application is to demolish the taxpayer building and construct a new building, replace windows and doors, demolish the rear portion of the firehouse, and construct rooftop and rear yard additions. This was last presented at the public hearing of May 19th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. The applicant will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, let's open the proceedings. Commissioner Goldblum, will you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Commissioner Jefferson, will you second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The proceedings are now open and the applicant may begin.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Barry from Upper Studio Architecture. So a quick recap of the site and the location. In Greenpoint Avenue between Franklin Street and Manhattan Avenue in the Greenpoint Historic District. The lot consists of the existing two-story firehouse building and the one-story taxpayer, with the proposed modification of the creation of a multi-unit mixed-use residential building. On the left, we have the previously proposed massing, with the revised massing on the right. Some major revisions that we've made have been to simplify the massing at the top of the building, particularly as it relates to points visible from the street. The overall height of the building has been reduced from a full 6-story building to a 5-story plus penthouse building. The roof terrace has been removed from the top. We previously had a common roof deck, which allowed us to reduce the run of the elevator and eliminate the visibility of the elevator bulkhead, which will no longer rise up above the base of the building. We've simplified the massing at the initial setback to a simple brick sidewall with a 1-story setback level, setback 10 feet from the street wall, and simplified a number of the other massing elements. Portions of the penthouse will be visible from the street from certain vantage points. Another modification that affects the visibility and massing of the building was to recreate a limestone frieze that previously existed according to historic tax photos on top of the cornice of the firehouse. So we'll be restoring that vertical element, which effectively increases the height of the street wall. There's a bit of a lag here. So again, a little zoom into the proposed massing. Effectively, in terms of the color coding of the diagram, the lighter brown is brick facing with a setback and bracketed metal facade, metal clad penthouse. That'll be an anodized aluminum finish, and other elements related in a related finish at various setbacks above the rear portion of the firehouse. We will be maintaining both side bearing walls of the firehouse from the street back to a point 20-foot distant from the rear yard line. In the previous proposal, we were removing a good portion of those bearing walls to simplify the structural proposal, particularly on the right-hand side. So those brick walls will stay and be utilized as bearing walls in the structure. The roof will still be cut back, but the entire second floor will remain with its existing wood joist framing at the firehouse. So a good portion of the firehouse structure will be retained in this proposal. So this is a site plan, the existing conditions, the existing firehouse, the initial setback, the 5-story portion at 60 feet, the penthouse, and the various setback levels behind the firehouse facade. The previous proposal, the revised street wall of the new portion of the building. Modifications include reducing the overall window size from 8'6" tall to 7'6" tall, and 4'7" wide to 4 feet wide. So it may increase in the amount of brick surface, a reduction of the curvature of the arch-top windows, more in concert with the other existing buildings on Greenpoint Avenue. A reduction in the concave expression of the recesses at the front brick facade, the articulation, and the development of a more distinct storefront with metal elements in the same anodized aluminum finish, similar to other painted metal or cast iron storefronts in the commercial district, with larger windows at the base and a recessed portion to provide opportunities for signage. The front entry of the firehouse, basically the existing condition is 2 large steel doors, which are one of which is rendered here. Those are like very large sliding doors that are difficult to open. One of them would remain in place, and a new recessed entry door would be set behind it. And here you can see the proposed frieze being restored on the firehouse front. So a side-by-side comparison, the previously presented proposal and the current proposal. And some additional views. Previously, we had a very visible elevator bulkhead and a series of masses above from this angle. The side wall has been simplified. So we basically have the 4-story base, the setback, and the 5-story setback portion with elements of the penthouse visible in sections as you move around the building. So again, a side-by-side comparison with the sort of simplified and toned down massing of the top elements. View of the previously proposed building from the west side on Greenpoint Avenue. The revision, basically with the simplified side brick wall and the visible portion of the penthouse, which is also set back 5 feet from the sidewall as well. So this facade has a 5-foot setback on the side. Comparison. These are a little bit light here. A lot of the rooftop elements such as stair bulkheads and elevator bulkheads that would have been visible from that perspective have been removed in the creation of a penthouse and reducing the run of the elevator to 5 stories. Another view from the street, the previously proposed. The revised proposal. This is probably the most visible view from this direction of the proposed penthouse, which proceeds from the firehouse facade and effectively disassociates itself from it. Side-by-side comparison. Elevation. Proposed elevation. Real quick, so the previously proposed scope of firehouse demolition included most of the first and second floor and the roof. The revision will reduce the building depth at the rear to create our 20-foot rear yard. And again, keep the full first floor structure and second floor structure, and as previously proposed, a portion of the roof, as well as the full side brick bearing walls on either side. This is a pretty significant change structurally, as the previous proposal, we would have had a full concrete structure that basically nested within the perimeter of the firehouse. With this proposal, keeping the existing bearing walls, it'll be a hybrid structure with a concrete cast-in-place structure in the portion to the right, with a combination of wood and new light gauge or cold form steel framing in the firehouse portion and the portions above it. Previously proposed section view. Revision with the existing floor levels in gray. In the course of that revision, since we're keeping the second floor of the firehouse at the existing 14-foot level, the overall height of the building will be increased from the previous proposal. So the front wall, the front cornice will be increased to 52'6" from a previously proposed 50'6". Which basically you can see the relative heights of a number of the buildings on Greenpoint Avenue. We're also, this lot is a 35-foot wide lot, whereas a number of the other similar facades are 25-foot wide. So proportionally, we're scaling up to a slightly taller building and a 5-bay wide facade. And again, in context, and we're basically, relative to the context of Greenpoint Avenue, we're basically at the end of a row of buildings with sort of very similar massing, typical 4- and 5-story buildings, transitioning to the firehouse, and then a variety of scales and sizes moving towards Manhattan Avenue. Sightline view of the firehouse. So with the replacement of the limestone frieze, the majority of the setback portions are not visible. A portion of the penthouse, which is to the right, would be visible from the street. That's the previous. This is sort of just a rotational series of views from multiple perspectives, which illustrates the extent to which this portion of the setback and receding portion of the penthouse would be visible as one moves around the building. So as you can see, basically standing across the street looking up, this would, you'd have some visibility, and then from multiple perspectives, it recedes. Sorry. So the sightline section for the new portion of the construction, some roof and railing elements visible, largely penthouses not visible. In terms of the brick detailing, we basically revisited a lot of the detailing. We had previously had a sort of a aluminum surround at the windows, a more modern treatment that's been removed and replaced with a precast sill of a similar color to the proposed brick. The arch above the brick will be created from basically a soldier course with a embedded steel anchor system. So you'll see the underside of those brick elements, and I have a detail for that if you in one of the addendums. There's a slight setback of the vertical brick treatment from the horizontal pier to articulate that corner. So the brick will return into the window openings. The storefront is basically to carry that subtle expression of verticality, which ties it compositionally into the firehouse building. The storefront is basically taking that rhythm and bringing it down to the street with the metal element and the tall windows, the tall storefront windows, and the signage bands. It will match the adjacent. Some three-dimensional views of the brick detailing. And the storefront, which we've talked about, and some 3D views of the detailing of that relative to the brick. And some relationships to adjacent storefronts or other storefronts on Greenpoint Avenue with their cast iron bases with brick above. And lastly, I believe this next to last, the storefront entry, which we already talked about. So here's the original metal steel door from the historic photo with the glass lights. This is the previous proposal. We had proposed a new entry door, which was a single door that picked up on some of the language of that as a new construction. The revision would retain one panel and have a setback entry and side light in the same anodized aluminum finish as the storefronts and windows of the new construction. Here's a plan detail of that. You can see that door from the inside, the less painted version. From Milton, the view from Milton Street, we basically revised the rear facade to have a more vertically proportioned window, typically throughout. We have a stucco rear facade, which would be bracketed between the brick sidewalls. So the expression of that brick sidewall that you see from the street and bracketing the penthouse would carry through to the rear facade. And above the fifth floor, the vertical, the penthouse portion, which is visible from Milton Street, would be the same aluminum cladding. This is the previous proposal with the all stucco facade and the wider, more contemporary windows. The sight lines are fairly similar to our previous presentation. This is the previous massing and the proposed visibility. Previous and proposed. As you can see, this is a part of the street that has the smaller two-story buildings Milton Street has a very varied context with, as you walk up and down Milton, there's a variety of towers at the waterfront, this water tower actually, and other construction visible above these lower buildings. So there's addendum material which might answer any questions. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg.
On the EXO on page 5, why is part of the penthouse over the firehouse brick and not metal?
This is metal, and are you talking
No,
about
that part there,
this
yeah.
portion? This was first. It's not a visible portion of it, but there's this idea of this sort of interrelationship between the two parts of the building. This actually sits at a core where we have the elevator and we have skylights that bring light into the lobby space. So the treatment of this as part of this building as brick and carrying across sort of made sense in that sort of in that
Thank you.
reading of the two.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Thank you. I didn't see this. This is the first time seeing it, so forgive me if you've answered these at past meetings. Why the vertical expression of the facade? The recess, the curving bays creates a very vertically oriented facade with a lot of, with depth and shadow that emphasizes that. Why did you choose to do that on this particular site?
This has more to do with its relationship to the firehouse building, and this sort of similarly arched top and this two-story expression. This will be the entry to the residential portion of the building, with this being commercial storefront. And so it was basically a design decision to start to marry these two parts together.
Okay,
else?
and then what was behind the decision to do vertically oriented? I guess they're casements or vertically oriented windows?
I think just carrying through this vertical expression, preferred functionally, and it ties into that vertical expression, similar to the vertical brick in the recesses. Creating a modern building with elements and proportions tying back to the context.
And the side walls are the same brick as the face?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mann?
A couple questions. I'm interested in the limestone frieze at the top of the firehouse that you brought up. I didn't notice its presence or lack thereof in the previous presentation. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Is that there today? And
No.
if so, what is the rationale for either keeping it or recreating it? And then are you removing interior space behind the cornice and that frieze? It becomes a very tall parapet, really a wall, to the terrace behind it.
Correct. It becomes basically an inner court
Mhm.
for that apartment.
And does the frieze exist today?
No, it doesn't.
And what is your rationale for recreating it?
Here we go. This is actually the 1980s photo, where it was removed at that point.
Nice.
Well, we find it aesthetically balances out the facade of the firehouse. I think it's unfortunate that it was removed. And it does provide some benefit to reducing the visibility of other elements of the setback portions. We're able to reduce the overall massing that you see at the top of the building and raise the building to allow us to keep the second floor level at 14 feet, which is higher than we anticipated, 12 foot. So in raising that and then shifting some of the mass around, having this frieze allows us to sort of conceal that. It also brings the buildings, the two parts of the building into a closer relationship in terms of height on the street facade.
Thank you. One more question. You've changed the firehouse doors, which are the main entrance to the residences, as I understand it. Is the leaf that you are keeping, does that exist today, and is it historic fabric, and is that sort of the genesis of this change?
It does exist.
Okay.
It's been painted over and concealed on the outside, but it's not in great shape on the inside. It's rusted. There's parts of it that are falling off, but it is there.
And it's historic.
Yes.
Thank you.
You can see a photo of it here from the inside.
Is it proposal for it to be red or white? Because there's an elevation showing it white in the deck as well.
Is there?
It's in the elevational shots.
This would be the proposal.
This is the proposed.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
Would it be possible to keep the other door in a open position behind the vestibule as a remnant? I realize,
Actually showing it here.
oh, you are keeping it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chu?
Just a material question, you had mentioned stucco, and that is on the rear facade,
That's correct.
sandwiched between brick party walls?
Well, yeah, effectively brick sidewalls, brick perimeter walls. So you read these walls very visibly from the street. And also, in terms of the, if we go back to the street views.
The rear, can you show the rear view?
Sure. But I think the whole language emanates from what you see on the street. For example, on the left, the sidewall.
Return.
And then from the right, we have this sidewall.
Right.
And we also have the penthouse articulation is a metal facade bracketed between the two brick walls. And so that treatment carries to the rear facade. So I have the elevation.
I don't see it there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so these are the sidewalls. We return the brick to about 1.5 feet and begin the stucco treatment, and then transition to the metal top.
Can you show the view from the back, the perspective view?
Sure. The view from Milton Street.
Okay.
So you're basically seeing the penthouse portion from the back. So you're seeing the metal portion. The stucco portion will be visible in the rear yards only.
You don't see the party wall here.
No. No, that treatment would be only experienced in the rear yard.
So the stucco is only on the rear facade and on that curved element that's between the two lots?
No, just on the rear facade. is
Oh,
the
that's
stucco.
brick, that
That's
other
brick,
element.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jefferson?
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
You're the horse.
take the entry facade to the building. It's in plan, it's L-shaped, right? I mean, everything that you have done is so taut, so well done that in plan to put this L-shaped piece, why not just move the whole door back and just keep it simple? Why? Why?
It was an attempt to keep the door in its position. So moving those are large sliding doors that would never be appropriate for a residential entry. So, but to keep it at the street front, and then have the other one slightly visible.
It's a memory of what was there.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And it keeps
That-
you
that-
dry when you enter the building.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, Commissioner Mann?
Trying to fake you out there. I have a question. This is a good image for it. These vertical piers, it may just be my perception, but in some images, they appear to have a hard 90-degree corner and they return a bit perpendicular to the street wall before this curved element intersects them. In other images, I think particularly the line drawing, it appeared that this curved face meets, oh no, here, it's the other way around. Here, I see the return. In the imagery, it appears that the curved face meets, I don't know, tangentially the surface.
We're
Which
seeing
is
a,
it?
a small edge here.
Okay.
And yeah, that is the intention to not have like a vertical mortar joint right where the two meet,
Okay.
but to
Okay.
return.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, not seeing, we'll move to discussion, but I do want to note that we have not received any additional testimony on this item since we had the public hearing on May 19. So this is an application for new housing in the Greenpoint Historic District. It includes the demolition of the taxpayer building and construction of a new building. And on the firehouse to demolish part of the rear, create a new lobby entrance, and construct additions. The applicant has made a number of changes to the proposal that are responsive to the commissioner's comments at the public hearing. Much more of the firehouse will be retained, and the brick detailing and the design of the rear facade and the size of the windows on the front facade.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. You provided a lot of views, close up and far away to help understand its context in the neighborhood. I think that was much appreciated. In terms of the revisions that were made, I think we'll start off with the firehouse. The frieze was clearly an original element, as you've shown in the image from the 40s or a bit after that. I do think that helps the scale of the street. It does give a sense of continuity on the human scale sort of street front wall. So I think that was a positive move on your part. In terms of the entry door, there were lots of questions about the existing door and sliding character versus this revision. I think that I appreciate the effort to keep and retain the existing sliding door location. I feel like this is appropriate, and I'm okay with the revision that you've done and recessing it to have the operable door to the side. I think you should just work with staff in terms of the detailing so that doesn't feel quite too foreign with the other half that you've recessed. In terms of the revisions to the neighboring lot building, you've made some efforts to simplify in some ways the facade that you originally had, which was, I feel some of my comments were about the detailing. I still think that there's some fussy details in the current proposal. However, I do appreciate a sense of scale and articulation that was lacking in the first proposal. I do think that you need to work closely with staff on the returns of the brick conditions at the vertical elements, at the head conditions, the underside lintels, which are not properly displayed here at the top of those vertical elements. Work with staffing on that fine tuning and detailing. In terms of the addition and the mass setback behind, overall, I think that the mass from the street front face is acceptable and appropriate. it's been simplified. It was clearly indicating more of a combined lot expression. This feels more typical in terms of lot lines dividing the two lots and respecting the firehouse, which is really a lot of the intent in the comment from the previous presentation was that the firehouse felt like just a facade left. This retains its sense of individuality. Much appreciate the revision to retaining more and most of the structure of the firehouse, the load-bearing party walls, floors, and structure associated in terms of floor-to-floor heights also being retained is good. A lot more of the firehouse is existing in this proposal than the previous one. I think that where things feel a little bit off to me, and this is something that I'm looking at in your renderings, is on the terrace of the addition setback, you do indicate in many views a railing that's for occupying that upper larger terrace. And in a lot of the renderings in the lower right, you can see it here, just sort of cut off. You display the glass like it's invisible, and we all know that that's not really the case. I think I would prefer looking at maybe doing a simple picket or metal railing that actually has a little bit more presence but feels more realistic than what's being shown. I feel like the glass is going to be very evident up there in all the fittings. So I would like the applicant to consider a change in materiality of the guardrail at the top. I'm also a little feeling like I don't understand the rear facade and its impact. On the front facade here, you see that you're clearly delineating the two lots, and that helps with the sense of scale. On the rear, the party walls are expressed, but they're sandwiching the two lots together, thereby increasing the sense of scale of them. It is this sort of taller mass as well. I feel like the stucco may feel jarring in that neighborhood, and I'd like the applicant to consider change to a brick facade. That will help, I think, with the sense of difference in terms of mass and also materiality in terms of how the neighborhood feels. The 2 feet increase on the new building facade, I can accept this. I feel like this block has some varied heights, and that 2 feet that this block can accommodate that type of slight increase. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Chan, you had asked for some more details about the brick detailing, and overall was suggesting simplifying some of the design.
Stephen have covered in great length a lot of the comments, and I think that number one, I have to commend the applicant for keeping the firehouse and restoring the frieze. I can accept that. I agree with Commissioner Chu that they should work with the staff to refine the details because especially at the rear, I think the stucco really. And I also agree that this is not the truth in rendering. The glass railing is going to be highly visible, and I think the commissioners would like to see what they come up with in terms of working with staff of maybe I won't suggest the alternative right now other than what Stephen has suggested, but maybe take a look at it. In terms of the proportion, I still find that even though they simplified, especially in the rear, I think it needs some work there. And so I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Commissioner Akwembe, you had found the height acceptable, but thought the facade needed to relate a little bit better to the neighbors and overall sort of reduce some of the complexity and refine the design.
I believe the applicant in general listened to our comments, and I do see the reduce in massing and fussiness, and also the attempt to refine the details. So I believe that's a positive direction. I also agree with the amount of retainage in the firehouse is a good move. And I guess furthermore, I'll speak about the railing at the top. Um, I'm with Commissioner Chu that it should be turned into a picket. It could be possible that we push it back so it's not visible, but I think from the oblique views, it's still visible. So a change in material might be a better move. Those are my comments.
Commissioner Ginsburg. You had, let's see, wanted more information on the storefronts and signage, the distinction, excuse me, thought the penthouse was too visible and complicated and had some design recommendations for the rear facade.
So first, I want to thank the applicant because this is much better, and I appreciate your listening and responding to us. So I, in general, agree with my fellow commissioners. And I agree about the railing should be picket. At the rear facade, I think the issue is there should be something delineating the two buildings. Because in the front, they're very much two buildings. In the back, there's no way. And it could be as simple as like a brick pier indicating where the division is between the two buildings or something. I would, the other thing, and then if other commissioners don't feel this way, it isn't strong. The part of the building over the firehouse that is brick, which is, I think, the lobby and elevator, I think that should be metal. And just clearly delineate that that is an addition on the roof and not sort of a part. But again, if others don't feel that way, I'm all right with the way it is. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness of what you've done.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Wilder. I'm calling people that were here. Sorry. Apologies. You had comments that were similar to others.
Good morning. I want to thank the applicant for out of the comments of the all right. I'm okay with bringing back the for its historic purpose it served as you. Top bills. Very interesting. But I think it's okay. I just think it needs height of the building?
Actually, I made an error and I should have called Vice Chair Master. Apologies all around.
Thank you. I want to commend the applicant, as the other commissioners have done. You were very responsive, in particular, in terms of retaining significant structure of the firehouse. I think that was very nice the way you did it. I'm fine with increasing the freeze. It makes a lot of sense. It kind of lines it up better with the existing buildings. And I'm fine with the door. I understand why you have designed it the way you have. In terms of the new building, I like this design significantly better, increasing like low, making the size of the windows smaller, making the arches less pronounced. I like what you did with the storefront. I really think it grounds the building and it blends in better with the streetscape and the adjacent building. I agree with the other commissioners about the glass railing. I think you can change the materiality or push it back to reduce the visibility. And I also agree with the comments about the rear facade, that you could work with staff to look at the materiality of the rear facade. And in terms of the rooftop addition, I think you did a great job in terms of simplifying the massing and the material. I think, I don't feel as strongly as Commissioner Ginsburg in terms of the brick, the changing it to metal, but I think it's definitely something that you can explore with staff. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Mann.
Thank you. Thank you to the applicant. This is a much improved application. I appreciate in particular the simplification to the massing, and I'll start there. I believe that I spoke last time about, kind of clarifying the identity and your architectural intention for this project. There was a bit of, schizophrenia between the facade and the way that the rooftop was handled, and that's really, you've gone a long way to clarifying that the idea here really is that they have two distinct identities as expressed on the front facades. I'm definitely with Commissioner Ginsburg that this little element that is brick at the recessed rooftop facade, which is over the firehouse, undercuts that newly found clarity of intention. I don't believe it's visible anywhere. So if the applicant wants to keep it, I would be okay with that. But I think it's a stronger architectural proposition if it were to be metal. A bit of my own opinion there, I suppose. I think retaining the frieze, I wanted to compliment you, is not just, really about retaining historic fabric, but that was quite a clever move to disguise, additional mass and the new height of the new building. So that was a really quite a positive move. Again, all of that sort of positive simplification is a bit undercut by the presence of the glass guardrail at the top. As others have stated, simple pickets painted in a dark color often are actually sort of counterintuitively less present than a glass guardrail. And if it could be pushed back, that would be an improvement as well. Moving on, I appreciate, in the firehouse, the maintenance of additional existing fabric. I know that's no small investment and effort. So thank you very much. You've done the same thing with the firehouse doors. I remain a little uncomfortable with the kind of permanent missing tooth approach to, one being sort of slid open. I'm unclear how it would be pinned in the open position and then have a new glass storefront meeting the back of this door. I think the detailing there needs some work. If there were a strategy where both of these historic doors could be visible at some point, I think that would be best. But if not, I would suggest that the recessed entrance doors not be this silver gray color, but rather be dark and recessive, perhaps black, or maybe even the same deep red as the door that is being retained. Moving on to the facades, similar to other commissioners, I think this is a very interesting idea. I think it's going to be difficult to execute, but I'm okay with it. I think many details will need to be reviewed with staff to ensure that the execution lives up to your vision. Nonetheless, it is improved. There's additional opacity. The arches and curvature are more subtle and relate better to the historic firehouse. I did have one detail comment. There are soldier course bricks at the top of the archtop windows. I believe those should probably be sort of splayed so that they're, normal or perpendicular to the arch as opposed to completely vertical. But others may have more expertise than I do. I thought that Commissioner Goldblum's questioning about the vertical mullions within the windows was an interesting line of inquiry, and you might explore with staff some additional buttons or alternative operation to sort of relate even more strongly to the firehouse. You're beginning, you've gotten partway there with the archtop windows. And then, as others have noted, I think the rear should be considered in masonry in lieu of stucco or ephes. Thank you for your improvements. Much appreciated.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. So this is the first time I'm seeing this one. It's an interesting scheme. I agree with a lot of what's been said already. I think the storefront looks fine to me as is. For me, this street is such a remarkably consistent street in some ways, in that the housing is so very uniform in its expression. And that I would call that expression planar, flat. So the kind of verticality and three-dimensionality of the facade to me seems a little curious. I do understand the desire to attach it to the firehouse, which is itself rather flat. But I really don't see it that way. If I look at the streetscapes, I don't see it as belonging to the, or seeking to create an affinity with the bank. I'm sorry, with the firehouse. It looks like it's housing. And so it just feels a little kind of out of place to me, but it sounds like you're going to be coming back anyway, so take that for what it's worth and throw that in the mix with the other comments, some of which related to the front facade and some of which did not. I do think that another very, very consistent element of the housing on this block is the double hung window. So I think it might be worth considering introducing some horizontality to the windows as well. The verticality, I think a single pane would be okay because it's kind of neutral. But I think that once you go with the vertical mullion, it just feels out of place. I have no concerns about the brick crossing the border line between the two buildings. I do think it's wonderful that you're retaining as much material of the historic building as you are, and the doors I think is fine. I thought it was kind of curious until I saw that little tail of the other door that's going to poke out, which I think is a nice detail, which kind of makes it kind of logical. We have seen things like that in other cases. I do agree very, very strongly with Mark's view about the rear facade and having the echo of the firehouse come through on the rear facade as some kind of expression will break up what is otherwise a relatively non-contextual facade. I think it'll help restore some scale for the donut. I think that the railing should be pickets. I have no concerns about the penthouse structures. I do think it's curious that you have the use of the face brick on the side walls in a site like this, which again does not feature that kind of three-dimensionality. I think it's very much characterized by the planarity of the street facades. To me, it feels wrong. It's not doesn't rise to the level of making it inappropriate. But if others here are urging you to consider changing the rear facade to something that's not stucco, which I guess the obvious move would be brick, you might consider making the whole thing into a standard non-face brick that would make the volume read more contextually.
Commissioner Jefferson?
So when I looked at this last night, I looked at it in terms of the whole block. And I was became aware of the addition of a new language in the middle of the block, this vertical insertion, and the fire station. And then I thought, how clever, he's inserting a new language in this existing block. And I said, it's kind of odd, why? And then I looked and I said, he saved it for me because of the datum that was consistent on the right-hand side. If you look at, you see the datum of the base running across. And on the left-hand side, there's no datum. It's just follows the firehouse. So you see there's a kind of a balance. And in the center of this block, there's this kind of new language that's inserted. And I thought, because of the datum, I can accept it. The firehouse, I can accept it. It looks really powerful and holds its place on the block. I didn't understand why the facade of the new building had to be that color. Like, why not make it the same value as the rest of the block and keep the verticality if you wanted to, so it harmonized in terms of material with the whole block? Because I think this block is special. It really seems to hold together as a block, but he wanted the contrast. And I could accept that, I guess. In terms of the rear facade, I think the overlapping of the two forms is fine. If it's brick, it would be better. If it was articulated, it would be even better. I think the glass railing, metal railing is better than the glass railing. It's up to the architect. And those are my comments.
So I think that we have a critical mass here to approve this, but working with staff on a number of different design details. Commissioner Chu, could you read the motion?
Yeah, I just want to clarify our position on the party wall that Mark raised.
Yeah, there
I
was
agree with
Mick.
Mark.
You agree with
I
Mark?
think, and I think Mark, what Mark is referring to is the step up at the penthouse on the party wall. Is that what you were referring to?
Well, I'm talking about two things. In the rear, trying to differentiate
Between the lots.
and then in the setback in the front where the elevator is brick, making that metal so it ties in more with the rest of the penthouse.
Oh, I see. When you,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Others don't feel that way. It's not.
So I think what we'd be looking to recommend is that the applicant work with staff on the brick detailing throughout the new building's facade at all of the different intersections of openings, et cetera. That railing that you can see over the new building be changed to metal and possibly set back somewhat to reduce visibility. That the rear facade be changed from stucco to brick. and potentially the applicant explore delineating in some way between the firehouse's rear facade and the new buildings. Put that in the explore category, as well as considering the change in material from brick to metal on this small elevator extension on top of the firehouse.
Okay. In the case of 122 to 124 Greenpoint Avenue, Greenpoint Historic District, taxpayer building with and a Beaux-Arts style firehouse built in 1910. The application is to demolish the taxpayer building and construct a new building, replace windows and doors, demolish the rear portion of the firehouse, and construct a rooftop and rear additions. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the existing altered taxpayer building at 122 Greenpoint Avenue is not one for which a historic district was designated. Therefore, its demolition will not detract from the special architectural historic character of Greenpoint Historic District. That the demolition at the contributing full lot firehouse building at 124 Greenpoint Avenue will be limited to the rear facade and the rear 10 feet of the side walls and floor plates to create a 20-foot rear yard, and will not eliminate any significant architectural features. That the construction of a rooftop addition on the firehouse and partial roof realignment will facilitate the adaptive reuse of this historic building as a residential structure. That the above-ground footprint of the proposed building will be smaller than the existing buildings, resulting in a deeper rear courtyard and more open space within the block. That the plane of the street-facing facade of the proposed new building will align with the facades of the firehouse and the other adjacent and nearby properties, thereby reinforcing the street wall. That the height of the proposed building street wall and its typical floor heights are consistent with the variety of building heights in the streetscape. That the vertical proportions and solid to void ratio of the proposed primary facade will harmonize with the fenestration patterns found at tenement buildings in the surrounding streetscape. That the proposed materials and details of the primary facade, including undulating brownish tan brick cladding, punch window openings with simple dark finish tilt and turn windows, and the projecting curved cornice reflect the synthesized historic facade elements of the historic buildings in the streetscape. That the scale, materials, configuration, and details of the proposed base featuring bronze finish metal piers, spandrel and door-like storefronts will harmonize with the mixed commercial and residential character on Greenpoint Avenue and will help differentiate and delineate the new building's commercial ground floor from its residential upper floors. That the rear facade, which is partially visible from Milton Avenue, is simply designed with punch windows and a high solid to void ratio and will be residential in character. That the visible setback floors at the new building and deeply setback rooftop addition at the historic firehouse are scaled in mass so as to not overwhelm or detract from the buildings or the streetscape. That the new entrance infill at 124 Greenpoint Avenue, consisting of the historic firehouse doors, remain fixed in place, and an integrated gray finished metal entrance assembly will ensure the retention of significant historic fabric and support the use of this entrance as the primary residential entrance. And the proposed light fixtures flanking the entrance will reinforce the new entrance to the ensemble. That the proposed new building and adaptive reuse of the firehouse building will enhance the streetscape and the historic Greenpoint district. We ask that the applicant work with staff on revising the proposal to replace the glass rail at the roof terrace to a simple picket metal painted element. That the applicant look at replacing the rear stucco facade with brick. That the applicant look at exploring alternate materials to simplify the front facade curved element joining the two lots, and potentially look at that being a simple storefront metal consistent to the adjacent construction. And also that the applicant look at the possibility of horizontal window divisions in what is now purely vertical mullions on tall windows. Was there something else about the material of the penthouse that I missed?
I think you covered the exploring the change of material
Yeah.
on the elevator extension over the
Yes.
firehouse, the railing, you covered the
I covered
railing,
that.
the rear facade to brick, and potentially a delineation between the firehouse back and the new building's back.
The applicant could explore dividing the rear facade to reflect the separate two lots by a potential vertical element and explore that with staff.
I think that's it.
And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Chen, could you second the motion?
Second.
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Chair Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master,
I,
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Equimbe,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's been approved, and please do continue to work with staff. And we're going to move to the next item.
Right.
Did we, wait, did we? Okay.
All right, the next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 26-07016, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 531, Lots 17, 56, and 52, 375 Lafayette Street in the NoHo Historic District Extension. This is currently a parking lot, and the application is to construct 2 new buildings. This was last presented at the public meeting of April 14th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. The applicant will present revisions to the proposal in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, let's open the proceedings. Commissioner Chen, can you make a motion to open the proceedings? And Commissioner Quembe, could you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, not seeing any. The proceedings are now open and the applicant may begin. Sorry, just bear with us while we, are we good, Corey? Okay, we're good.
Good morning. Chris Cooper, I'm partner at SOM. Very pleased to be back representing 375 Lafayette. So as a reminder, as context, this is the site today, a corner lot, an empty parking lot at the intersection of Lafayette and Great Jones Street. And this is the condition and was the condition of the site at the moment of designation. So the use predates designation. Great Jones and Lafayette, both wide streets, bisect the NoHo Historic District and largely define the southeast quadrant, which is the district extension. This intersection, as the original terminus of Lafayette, has played an important role in defining the original district. And just as this district is the rich evolution of urban infrastructure and also evolution of building typologies, it also is the product of the evolution of zoning and policy changes. And so there have been important recent changes that have enabled and even promote housing, particularly with affordable components. And in 2021 and the city of Yes in 2024 have really positioned this site for transformation. And they've positioned this site uniquely in the district for transformation. It is the really the only site that is able to accommodate this kind of mandate for housing. It is the one of 2 empty lots in the district. It is by far the largest lot, and it has this unique configuration of being a corner lot, so we have light and air on 2 sides. So it is the site that enables this potential in the district. And that is, conveniently coincides with a neighborhood that is really amenitized for residential. It is well connected to public transportation. There are diverse programmatic offerings and proximity to NYU. So our proposal will add more than 200 residential units. And of that, approximately 60 affordable units. So the district is a district composed of many large-scale buildings. And large-scale buildings that are predominantly to the west and to the northern quadrants of the district. And then our site is a kind of hinge or transition to the southeast quadrant, which is, we see a finer mid-size grain in that in the district extension. And that maps very consistently with the historic street grid. And so there is this is the green represents the historic wide streets in the district. The large buildings fall very consistently along those historic wide streets. And then you see the kind of the significant break in the grid when Lafayette extended to the south. So the large buildings really correspond north side of the wide street and then change with that break in the street to the south. And we mapped here, like we did in our original hearing, a sampling of some of the large buildings in the district. And they've been described as, you know, large, simple boxes. They are consistent architectural features. They're repetitive, consistent facade module make up the articulation of these buildings. And I'll just note here that we've outlined large buildings that fall out of our district to the east along Bowery, but those will appear in some of the renderings that we see. The underlying zoning defines program area, but it also sets the height. And so the underlying zoning of the site is a maximum of 195 feet. And that is, as we see here, mapped with some of the buildings in the district, is not an outlier in the district. It will not be 195 feet. It will not be the tallest building, and it certainly will not be the widest building in the district. What is unique, though, in the district, perhaps, is this mandate for setback. There's a required setback at 125 feet before reaching that full height of 195. And so we came forward with a proposal, and we heard many comments. It elicited a response. On the positive, there was, I think, large consensus that a building of this scale is actually appropriate on our site. But our stepping street wall within a single building is simply not an appropriate strategy. And so we should consider, as a way of breaking down the massing, the expression of the technically two buildings on the site, and also consider the quantity of red terracotta, and maybe even think about changing materials, and that we should really focus on the length of Great Jones and trying to address variation in scale along Great Jones, and also create greater distinction between the base of the building, the street wall of the building, and the setbacks of the building. And then, not pictured here, but of course, we were also asked to better address the lot line and the rear facades. And so we heard those comments, we've absorbed those comments, and we're coming back with a fundamentally different approach to address those comments. So we have redesigned this as two distinct but related buildings. And the two buildings are individually expressed with these two different color palettes and also facade expressions. And the step street wall massing has been eliminated, and the massing has been dramatically simplified. So each building is defined as seen as a simple continuous street wall and setback. Two simple boxes make that street condition. And we've also taken the east building, and we have a massing and a facade treatment that addresses kind of variation and scale along the length of Great Jones. And the base of the buildings, the street wall of the building, is distinguished and differentiated in material and detail from the secondary facade. And then the rear elevations have been redesigned to read clearly as two buildings and also simplified. And so, we want to describe what we think is a fundamentally different approach, an approach that that positions this as two appropriately scaled large buildings along Great Jones. And we have leveraged the street wall condition to set one consistent cornice line and to shear and step that cornice line at the line between the two buildings, both at the street wall and at the upper portion of the building. And then we've used that consistent 10-foot setback to distinguish the upper portion of the building, the secondary facade, from the blocks of the base of the building. And so we've set back consistently 10 feet. That happens also on the lot lines. And so we'll show that it becomes an important way of distinguishing the base blocks from the upper portions of the building. And so we have now a west building and an east building. We have taken down that long length of 226 feet to two buildings that are similarly width, but the west building is a little bit larger and maxes out at 126 feet in width. So our facade articulation expresses these as two related but independent buildings. And we have the consistency is apparent. We've taken that consistent 25-foot module that is found commonly in the district on our streetscape. That is in both buildings. There are similar material components in both buildings, but the distinction comes in opposing contrasting color and also in the detailing of the expression. And then we have articulated the setback facade to distinguish it from the primary facade. And then the length of Great Jones, we have added variation in the facade along Great Jones to try to build greater breakdown of scale, and articulated the front door of the building in a different way so that we have some variation along that length of Great Jones. And then on Lafayette, dramatically simplified massing, a simplified building, one continuous cornice line at the setback line, and then one consistent 10-foot setback above to the secondary facade. And we've taken that same setback on the street side on Great Jones and also on the lot line side. So it distinguishes the upper portion of the building from the lower portion of the building. This setback, as I mentioned before, is a contemporary zoning condition, the setback, but it is now becoming more common in post-designated buildings, and including 363 Lafayette. And Aaron of Higgins Quaisbarth is going to talk a little bit more later in the presentation about the evolution of these forms in the district. For the materiality, we have looked very carefully to the district. We have borrowed one of many great examples of a deep red masonry, both in historic examples and contemporary. And then we have chosen a contrasting neutral color in this in a gray that we find in the district. It's kind of pewter or zinc colored gray. And there are great examples in 622, 626 Broadway. And both buildings painted the same color gray historically, and then more contemporary additions in stone and metal and in terracotta of this neutral gray tone. So we've developed two palettes, two mirroring palettes for the two buildings, and we've reduced down to 4 simple materials for both palettes: a red palette and a gray palette. Both consist of granite for the base of the building, terracotta and painted metal for the primary facade, and the painted metal secondary facade, and brick lot lines. So the diagram on the left kind of maps out how we've been thinking about materiality. Really, the street wall facing out on both to the west and to the south are composed of terracotta and painted metal. And at the base of the building, the storefront will use a very saturated version of that same color in a painted metal to distinguish the storefront. And then we take that same tone to the upper setback portion so that we distinguish the setback portion. It is a darker tone, and we're trying to bring forward the street wall and recede the secondary upper portion. And for detailing in the facade, we again are looking to the many great examples in the district. There are many things to discover as one looks up, and these raking views in the district buildings. There's a kind of secondary detail that is often motif driven. And we have borrowed the kind of egg of the egg and dart and embedded that into contemporary terracotta construction. And so we are then putting this interesting slice at the base of that. And we think that this is a way of embedding contemporary craft into the material, into a historic material. So we'll look at the kind of detail of the base, the middle, and the top of the building, starting at the storefront. The western building is a two-story articulation. On the corner building, we have made a two-story storefront. And so it is a base of granite. Terracotta extends down, and then everything within that 2 stories is this deep saturated red tone that helps it recede and helps expose the kind of frill of that detail at the top of that 2-story, where we see the repetition of that cut egg profile in the terracotta. On the east building, 1-story articulation, similar profiles as the west building, but all in granite. And then at the top of that 1-story, we see again that slice that exposes that detail. The street wall facade, predominantly terracotta. There's consistency in both the west building and the east building in this modulation, a 25-foot established modulation. But the west building, we take the primary figure as the vertical pier at the 25-foot module, and then also at the spandrel becomes a primary figure. And then each window is framed consistently, but with secondary to the configuration of the vertical pier and the spandrel. The east building, we are really focusing on the vertical, and we have taken the spandrel, and it's a recessive, receding, darker metal panel, so that the vertical becomes the primary. So similar components, but contrasting architectures between the two. So again, the buildings are meant to be related, but distinct. And then the upper portion is a darker tone meant to distinguish it from the facade, the primary facade of the terracotta, the street wall. We have gone down to a 12.5-foot module. It is lighter in material. We shift to the saturated darker paint color. It's painted metal. The detail changes from 6 inches of depth down to 3 inches of depth. So this is seen as the secondary facade. It's meant to be a more recessive facade relative to that street wall. And then the understanding the length of Great Jones and trying to find variation in this, beyond just the 2 building variation. We've looked to precedent, and there are great examples of these buildings of repetitive facade modules where you do see some variation in that with the addition of another figure like a fire escape. And so that does give some planar differentiation or planar break as you look down the street. There's also examples on our street of this large different scaled figure like the stone portal at the firehouse. And so we have taken that and tried to take in our east building the articulation, the kind of repetitive 25-foot module articulation, and introduce a simple plane break in one of those bays, the bay of the front door. And so we've preceded the glass and then incorporated planter boxes so that it gives you a little bit of distinction of one of those surfaces, so that on the oblique, you see this planar break, you see this distinction of one bay from another, a kind of subtle distinction like you might see with a fire escape in front of a consistent architectural bay. Here you also get a sense of the kind of depth and texture of those primary street wall facades. And then at the base of this bay, we have introduced a 3-story stone portal that becomes the front door of the complex. And so we've distinguished that, and this is also trying to introduce a different scale figure along the streetscape of Great Jones. And so, we'll walk around the building a little bit here. I have a series of views at street level where we start to understand how the street conditions perform in the district. And these are 50-millimeter lens views, so they're tight, more like human eye. Here we're looking south on Lafayette. We see again that 2-story corner articulation of the storefront. The kind of color and depth and variation of the facade. As we walk around the building, we see now the corner of Lafayette and Great Jones starting to look, glance north. I don't think that's me. Okay, I'll keep going. And so, here we see very clearly the red building on the corner, the 2-story articulation of the storefront, the relationship of our building to the Rauschenberg Foundation. Then, more glancing to the north. And I think, here we start to see that we believe the detailing, the materiality, the texture of the facade starts to resonate with the context of the buildings in the district as you see looking up Lafayette on the left. And then as we turn onto Great Jones, where we previously had one long consistent facade, you start to see here the distinction of 2 buildings and what that does for the scale of the streetscape. And so here we see the transition of the 2-story storefront, the stone portal of the front door, and then the transition down to 1 story beyond. So we can see even the taller building framing the block in the distance on the right, but also just the relationship of our figures next to, let's say, the figure of the portal of the firehouse. And then the reverse is a little mouse that feels them. And then the reverse where we look west on Great Jones and start to see again the relationship of the differing height storefronts, the depth in the facade, the materiality as it resonates with the facades of the district, and the relationship of the 1-story storefront in the foreground to the buildings directly to our east. All right, we're going to switch around to the back of the building while we search for the little technical mouse. The back of the building, we've really worked to try to address and simplify the rear facade. And one of the things that we're able to do is reduce the number of materials by not introducing a new material on the rear of the facade. And we can wrap around the metal, the secondary facade, to the rear facade, and we're able to do that because of this setback above on the lot line above the base of the building. So you see this on the bottom right, the kind of lot line condition of brick, and then the setback above that. And then we think there's a great simplification of the rear facade, but also you see the importance of the 2-building distinction. And that 2-building distinction is helping break down the wall of that rear facade. And so the lot line itself, simple, detailed brick facade, very consistent with the district. We've wrapped just the terracotta 2 feet on the corner, and then brick with some modulation of scale at the floor slabs with a running soldier course. And so now we step back again, step back to our, where we started this, our original proposal, the scale of the rear facade, and we start to understand the stepped massing and the kind of complexity that gave, and also the consistent lot lines that were quite vertical. So, and I think that's a very significant change. So you see the lot line was full height, and then we had the stepping on Lafayette, one material across the full width. So as we look forward, we start to see how all of these pieces add up to make real change. So first, the distinction of two buildings, but also the simplification of the massing on Lafayette, and that one consistent street wall height that is very consistent with street wall heights of neighboring buildings. And then the wrap of the masonry, so terracotta on Lafayette, but the wrap of the lot line masonry that you read the block, the low block of the building, that is the corner building on Lafayette, and then the secondary facade that wraps and becomes the figure in the rear facade. And so a few more comparative views of where we had been previously with the tall corner figure, and now I'm simplifying down to one simple box that makes the corner building, and then a setback to the secondary facade, that is darker and more recessive than the primary facade of the street wall. And then looking east on Great Jones, the previous scheme with a stepped massing and the prominence of the corner, and transitioning that to one mid-scale block, which is the corner building, and then a simple single cornice line. This figure is very close to the height of the original building on this site, and then a setback to the secondary facade above. And you also can see here that the scale of the corner building relative to the mid-block building, where there's that transition to gray, and then the buildings beyond. So it really changes the perception of the scale of the blocks of buildings. And the same looking west, the step facade. Here again, I'll point out the lot line condition, where we had the tall lot line wall as one sheer wall. And then this new configuration where we break to two buildings, two appropriately scaled large buildings that step from one another, and then the setback to the secondary facade. So you really change, that reading of the tall lot line to buildings that sit on the streetscape, and then the secondary facade above. It's a very, we think, a very dramatic transformation. And then here's coming closer on Great Jones, the one consistent long facade that we had articulated before, to two related but distinct elevations, and also the importance of the portal to give a figure that marks the entrance also to the complex, and is scaled to the streetscape. Also, I think here we're zoomed out enough that you can see the step in the cornice line from the west building to the east building. Then, one last context view, and this one is interesting. It's the stepping out of the district and looking west, and the new building is ghosted here, 354 Bowery, and out of the district, that building. But what you can see here is that this is a transition block between a wide street with larger scale buildings consistently to the north, and then a finer grain building consistently to the south. So you really do read that transition here between the north and the south. And I will just close. I want to pass on the presentation to Aaron of Higgins Quasbar, and but I do want to say that we heard many comments about our approach and our strategy to mass this building, and we have really absorbed those and changed to what we think is a much better contributing building. And so this is, we think these are positive steps to really transform the reading and the legibility of the mass and the figure on the site. And so with that, I'm going to pass to Erin to just walk a little bit through the history.
Morning, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Coys, Barth and Partners. So I'm just going to kind of step back and just refresh our memory on the context and appropriateness for the proposal in the context of the design revision specifically. And so looking here as a reminder of the context of Lafayette Street. We're just south of the site here with the two new buildings in the foreground. And we see that sort of great, rich and great variety of architectural style, building type, materiality in the streetscape. And of course, this all evolves as part of the historical evolution of the district and its specific phases of development, but one that we think the new building will fit into comfortably. Oops, I used the wrong arrow, sorry. And then here, looking back across the site toward the east, the vastness of the existing site. Just as a reminder, the building that was formerly sited here was demolished in the late 1920s, and it has essentially been a void at this corner, very significant corner historically since the 1920s, so nearly 100 years. And in all of the projects that we've seen on the other corners where new construction has occurred, the reinstatement of the street wall and the connection that the new street wall makes in the context is a critical point of all of the approvals that have happened over time. We also get to see that mid-range loft building scale that Chris noted on the south side of Great Jones, and you can see how it sort of steps down from the corner with the new buildings on the corner at Lafayette and mediating toward the mid-range scale of the commercial buildings. And as we presented in the original public hearing, the district evolves with three significant phases of development, and that's what creates this rich variety that we see in the context. And so that starts in the mid-19th century with early residential and institutional projects that are developed throughout the district. And then the second phase of development in the late 19th century, this is largely mid-rise commercial buildings, so those loft buildings that we see along Great Jones, and institutional construction. It's at this time that the orphanage that was previously sited on 375 Lafayette was constructed. And just as a reminder, this was the tallest building on Great Jones. Great Jones only extends 2 blocks, one to the east and one to the west, but it was the tallest building by far on Great Jones, and it was also the tallest building at the time of construction along Lafayette Place. So this is prior to the cut through of Lafayette Street. So this quarter has always been dominated by a very significant architectural element that was lost in the 1920s. During this phase is when Lafayette Street is established, and so that is the cut through that connected what was formerly Lafayette Place, which we see in the distance here, with what was Elm Street to the south. So just plowing through the blocks and connecting. But we're just south of the site. This is the orphanage, and but there's a distinct difference between the north side of Great Jones and the south side. The north side of Great Jones was characterized by larger scale buildings that fronted onto Lafayette Street and of significant architectural character with many institutional buildings. And everything to the south were the cut-through buildings. So kind of shards or remnants of previous buildings or exposed side walls. And so there was a distinct character from the north to the south. And our site is firmly within that historic Lafayette Place context. Further, that cut is made, and Lafayette Street, what was the original section of Lafayette Place, was maintained as 100 feet wide. The broad boulevard of significant buildings that fronted it, and the portion to the south, so from the south side of Great Jones and on, was 80 feet. So there was a material distinction between those two sections of Lafayette Street. And I think in one of the renderings we saw, which we can flip back to later, but you saw the proposed rendering at the street level of our new building and the 363, we were looking sort of southeast, and 363 is jutting out farther than the proposed 375. And that is that 20-foot difference in the street, because 363 is actually farther west of the site. The street extends out farther, and we can look at that more closely. And then finally, the last phase of development is this sort of large-scale commercial building development in the early 20th century. This is characterized by buildings such as 770 Broadway, which is the tallest building in the district. And so there is this sequential replacement and expansion of buildings over time, so increasing scale with each of these phases of development. Unlike other districts, the NoHo extension has a significant layer of contemporary architecture, and there's it is somewhat rooted, I think, in the number of vacant lots and undeveloped sites that existed prior to designation, but also post-designation, and also the concept of the boundary, the sort of jagged boundary around Lafayette, around the Bowery, has given way to lots of new construction. So there is this perceptible layer of new buildings that almost becomes a fourth phase of development within the district. And in the designation report, this phase of development is noted as highlighting the neighborhood's adaptability to changes brought with each new chapter of New York's history. And what is also characterized in these new buildings that we see here, and all three of these are located on Bond Street, is that there is a distinct massing that is established as part of these buildings, which reflects contemporary zoning of the period and then becomes sort of the basis for new development going forward. And so we see that influence in the approval of 363 Lafayette Street, which is right here. It has a 6-story base and then a setback mass above. It maxed out its zoning envelope. And in the findings, the commission noted that the setback massing provided for a transition between the mid-rise scale of the side street and the taller buildings on Lafayette Street with the setback portion. And so we think this is significant because the commission could have found that a simple street wall was the right solution here. It could have been limited in height. It could have been limited just to the base height at that time, but the commission did find that there was value in the transition or the mediation between the two parts of the building and found it appropriate to the site and to the district. And just to sort of recap some of the points that Chris was highlighting in terms of the wide streets. So we shared these maps in the public hearing, and this map highlights the wide streets. Of course, Great Jones is considered a wide street. It is the widest street between Astor Place and Houston. And then Lafayette is a wide street. It is 100 feet wide from the north side of Great Jones and to the north, which is 20 feet wider than Broadway. And then on the south side, it shifts down to 80 feet wide, which is why we get these interesting angles in the sight lines. And so as Chris noted, we have the conglomeration of tall buildings fronting onto the wide streets historically. And so what we did here was to sort of mask out the area of the cut through for Lafayette Street. So prior to the extension of Lafayette Place through the blocks, Lafayette Street terminated at Great Jones, and this was the site of the orphanage on the northeast corner. And so you can see the prominence, the wide boulevard quality of Lafayette Street, the tall buildings that formed around the wide street, and then at the terminus, the very tall building, again, the tallest building in the physical context of Lafayette Place and Great Jones, and how it dominated that site. And we see that the tall buildings that Chris had previously noted, the Silk Building, which is directly across the street, and which is number 4 and has a street wall of 151 feet, so much taller than our proposed street wall. And then the overall height of 770 Broadway, which we have at the sort of north end of Lafayette Place, establishing a street wall height of 220 feet. So very much in the physical context, direct relation to the site, we have buildings that represent the scale of each portion of the building as proposed. And of course, the commission has seen comparable projects on large development sites over time. Here are 3 examples. So one in Soho, 40 Mercer, 39 West 23rd Street in Ladies Mile, and then 100 Barrow in Greenwich Village. Each of these buildings was developed on a vacant site and incorporated a massing that reflected contemporary zoning. And they use massing strategies for mediating height. So the same characteristic that we talked about for 363 Lafayette, where the base relates to the immediate context, and then the setback to the taller portion relates to buildings elsewhere in the districts or even outside of the district. And so we think with the simplified massing that we've put forward today, the building achieves these same relationships with the immediate context and the height of taller buildings in the district. And so I think concluding here is meaningful as a sort of reminder of the trees and the forest. We are looking south along Lafayette Street with the building in the distance. The public theater is on our left here. As Chris described, this is really a singular opportunity in the historic district for a meaningful contribution to and for housing. And our challenge from the outset has really been, how do you maximize the housing benefit as envisioned under the rezoning in an appropriate way? And I think what we've put forward today, we believe does that with 2 appropriately scaled and individually expressed buildings sited on 2 wide streets, a height that relates to the immediate context of the street wall and the greater heights of the district typical of other approvals. And this endeavor is not applied to other sites. This site has a unique history in the history of Lafayette Place, the buildings that formerly were sited here, and its impact in terms of what can be developed. And most importantly, the proposal meets the moment. It's a new building that continues the architectural evolution of the district, which is an important characteristic of the district, while addressing the civic priorities of today. It's quite literally filling the void. And I think with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to first note that Commissioner Mahan is recused from this item. Commissioners, are there any questions? Commissioner Jefferson.
So you gave us examples, page 50, examples of buildings, of different types of modern buildings, older buildings. So you went from page 51 to 54. So my question is, which example of all these buildings, go back to, say, this page, which examples are you using to design your building? What example? Are you using Herzog and de Mignon? Are you using, what's the image? What's the form you're looking for your building, so I could critique your building instead of, if you go to page 54, You have, keep going, keep going. You have these buildings, which is not what you're doing. You're doing something
No.
else. Right? It's a different, heavier buildings, not light, not modern.
A-
So which
absolutely.
one should I?
I think it's within the contemporary context you would analyze it in, because it's driven by contemporary zoning, and reflects the required street wall height and overall building height. And so none of these buildings could be built today. You could not match any one of these because they all exceed the street wall height.
So your building is light, not heavy, but you show us examples of heavy details, heavy examples. It, it doesn't seem to hold together to me, so, for me. So if this is the example that you're using, let's critique the building based on this. And the
Absolutely.
scale of this.
Mhm. Well, I wouldn't say the scale of this necessarily. I think it's part of the evolution. It's exactly. Yes. Exactly. Yes, yes. Agreed, Commissioner.
Could you go to the mic, please?
These are not examples of tectonics. These are examples of setback in the district. And so, we don't mean to, yes, that's true. Yes, is not, that's right. It's not historic masonry construction. It is, yes. We are building in today's time versus historically. Yes.
And commissioners, please do speak into the mic. If you can, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I have a few questions. The first is the planter boxes and recess that you show us don't show up in most of the renderings. What's going on? I could not, unless they're so minimal, I can't see them.
Let's see. So what you see here, so there is, yes, it is, they are there. And and what you see probably is the absence of the spandrel. And so because that consistent spandrel is there and it disappears, you see the kind of shadow just at this bay. And
Okay.
so it's a subtle planar break by pulling the glass back.
Next question.
Yes.
Who and how are the planters going to be maintained?
No, it's a great question. It has to be maintained by the building. And so the planters have to be, it's part of the building. It's a rental building. So the planters have to be maintained just like washing the windows.
Okay. And then one other, you have the tops being darker than the base, the
Right.
setback. Did you look at the alternative? Because it feels to me like those tops are heavy. And if you'd switch the colors, it might feel less heavy.
Right. So we did look at this, and our conclusion was that the darker tone receded versus when it was lighter, it comes forward. So we took the old kind of philosophy of lighter colors come forward, and we looked at both actually, and that was and it reinforced that because also the darker puts the material closer to the tone of the glass and the upper portion. And when it's a lighter material, it makes more contrast with the glass. So you see more texture and grid up there. So it was actually it was carefully calibrated to try to find recess and let the lower facade be more prominent.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail articulation, and I'm just trying to understand at the setback on the east building. I was looking at your elevation rendering on slide 24. Is that stone or brick that's between the vertical elements, the terracotta elements? No, if you go to 24, that.
So this is all metal. Everything that you see that you see either metal or glass, and these are the setback facades.
Yep.
So the recess facades.
But where B2 is indicated, that looks like a textured
Oh, so I'm
material.
sorry. Yes. So B2. Yes. Good question. So B2, those are the vertical
Recesses.
mechanical. So that is like actually a perforated metal.
Oh.
So it's metal, but it's perforated.
Oh.
And behind that are the vents, the intake and the exhaust
Oh.
for the mechanical.
And is that the case on the west building as well?
It is, so
Oh,
that,
so that's a perf metal.
it's not a louver, it's a decorative metal that sits in front of the grill, and it's a perf metal.
And does that happen down at the
And it
base
does,
too?
it does. So if I go down, that's what you
Oh,
see in,
didn't understand
in
that.
the reveal, yes. So that A2 is a perforated metal.
Okay.
And so we're integrating the facade, the mechanical system into the facade.
Facades.
And this is, these are these new contemporary, they're called Epica units. And they have two round, two round apertures, one intake, one exhaust. And so for each room, there's essentially those two round figures. And so they're behind one consistent perforated panel.
And
that
is
you
that
don't
just
see.
a round, what type of perf is that?
We've made it a neutral round perforation.
Okay. And so on this facade on the right, I see terracotta, and then at the spandrel conditions, is that also terracotta?
This is metal panel.
That's metal.
That's right.
Okay. So you keep the terracotta writing on the vertical, all the
That's
vertical
right.
thin elements.
So we've tried to reduce down to 4 materials. So we have terracotta, painted metal, and then brick and granite.
Is the terracotta reflected? Is it got a glossy finish?
No,
or
the
matte
terracotta is unglazed.
finish? Okay.
It's like a masonry.
Matte
It's a
finish.
matte, that's right. It's an unglazed terracotta.
Commissioner Jefferson.
So the issue for me is scale. And if you go back to the images that you have at the beginning, arguing about NoHo and Soho and the proportions, the scale variations between the two of them. Go over that one more time. I mean, the relationship between the two districts, and what is the difference between the two districts? What is the highest height in NoHo versus the highest height in Soho?
Right. So what I should clarify is that we are in one district, but there's the original district and the extension. And I think what our point is that it's all one district. So actually here, sorry.
So let's be precise. So let's stay with the district we're in, not that there was what is the highest, tallest building in that district?
Oh,
compared to
in our district, yes, I can be precise about that. That is 770. And so you see the height of 220 feet. So here's a sampling of some of the heights. So our site in the center of the district, 375 Lafayette. Across the street to our west is the Silk Building at 151 feet. To the north is 770 Broadway at 220 feet. You can step over to the buildings along Broadway, and there's a sampling of that, the Tisch at 175. And then all the way at the south, there's a large building that sits on Houston, Cable Building at 132. And that you see here, those heights.
Okay.
And then here, so this helps too. So the zoning envelope is maxed out at 195. So on the right, you see some of those buildings I just quoted. The 770 Broadway, which you see in the distance in the elevation. The Tisch, which is far to the west. Silk Building, which is 151. Silk Building's just to our west. There's also the Brooks Brothers, which is taller than that in this image to the left. So that's the range of heights in our district.
Some of the testimony or written comments we had, I just want to confirm this, said you added a floor and lowered the floor-to-floor height. Is that correct?
No, our floor-to-floor height is, I don't think that we've added, we have maxed out the number of floors that we can have in 195 feet.
But did you do that in the previous scheme?
Yes, we haven't changed we have not
Thank you.
changed the floor-to-floor heights.
Commissioner Chu.
Can you, in this drawing here, which is really useful, the mechanical of your design goes how high?
Oh, it's not, that's just maximum
Right, I
allowable.
understand
And
that.
so,
The
and
renderings show it quite low.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
so that's, this represents the, and actually, do we know the maximum height of our mechanical penthouse? Maximum height is 55. Okay, so there's, so I don't know the answer. So 195 is the line here.
The roof.
And then there's a 24-foot, that little box in the back, that is the elevator.
Elevator
that's
overrun.
24 feet.
But
Above
there's
that.
an expressive enclosure fence which you need around the equipment that is
And
setting a
that's what you
datum.
see here.
Yeah, what is that height?
And that height, 14 feet.
14 above 195.
That's right.
Okay.
So let's look at the facade.
I
The
think,
grid of the facade or the.
Commissioner
look-
Jefferson, I think they're clarifying one point for us.
What
They're-
is still-
Yeah,
Oh,
they're still.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm being corrected and I'm realizing what, I want to re-answer your question about the floor-to-floor heights. And so we have, yes, so our building showed one floor less in our last public hearing.
Hmm.
And so we have added a floor between what was expressed in the public hearing and what is expressed here today. And there is a slide that compares that. Yeah. So, excuse me. So is this, Gary, you're going to have to explain. Yeah.
Okay.
Please state your name for the record.
I'm Gary Koo, associate at SOM, fire project team. So here, this is the upper portion of what was originally presented. So if you look at level 13 and above, so above the maximum street wall height, in this version, we had the dormer. There was one less floor, and then all those floors above had a higher floor to floor. In our current proposal, we've lowered the floor to floor, those upper levels. So they all have a ceiling, floor to ceiling of 9 feet. And that's how we were able to have those setbacks while maintaining the amount of area by inserting a floor at the top.
So, right, 3 higher floors have been compressed to 4. And that's what, as you pointed out last time, we have to max out the base. So that allows us to do this excavation here to get some difference in the street wall. And it's also what allows us to do the 10-foot setback from the lot line. So those are carve-outs from where we were before, and those carve-outs are going into, excuse my misstating that, into this, using one additional floor. But now there's consistent floor-to-floor heights from bottom to top.
Okay, I think,
Does that make more sense?
No, I.
okay, Commissioner Jefferson, did you want to ask your question now?
On the facade grid varies. The lower volume has a certain grid and the taller volume has a different grid.
Right, so we're expressing here the 25-foot module. And then the upper portion, we've broken that to the 12.5-foot module. So we've added a kind of equal separation. So they align, this is perspective that makes it look like they're not aligning. They do align. And so that 25 is consistent. But then there's we've taken that down to a simpler 12.5-foot, not less horizontal.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
On slide 37. My question is, the mechanical bulkhead does not step back from the floors below. You really needed that space? Because before that top floor without windows, I presume, is part of the mechanical bulkhead.
So the mechanical is the mechanical bulkhead is above the windows. So what you're seeing here is that this is the 195 and it sets back that floor. So there's a planar break here.
No, I see
Yeah.
that. What I'm asking is between the top residential floor and the mechanical floor and
Right.
that setback, there is no break.
Right. So there is a break on three sides but there's not a break here in order to, it's true, this like right here, there's not. So here you have a break. Here
Right.
you have a break, but here you don't. And that was, actually it has to be at that plane because this is where the elevator overruns are. So that's what sets that line. And also, from our point of view, it helps simplify the massing in the back.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chu, did you have a question?
This on the lot line is brick. It is. And so we use brick just on the, and I'll go back to, yeah, just on the lot lines. And so it's a brick that's a similar tone to the terracotta, but it's less noble material. It's still a masonry material, but less noble than the terracotta of the street walls. So we're trying to put it in the same family so that you get this reading of one building block. So both masonry, but one is brick. That's right. That's right.
Commissioner Jefferson?
So the volumetric disposition of the site. So on this, you have a smaller volume on this street. Then on the side street, it's taller. And then the second volume, the gray volume, the two volumes sit exactly on top of each other. I mean, I'm trying to read the kind of composition of the volumes, the two
Yes,
different
and
volumes.
maybe I'll go to the roof plan, which is in the appendix here. I think that will make that more clear. Do you have a page number? Not finding it. There we go. All right, I'm sorry. So our lot line is highlighted in black. And we have the street wall here of Lafayette and the street wall here of Great Jones. And so I'll just point out that there's the first primary setback, which is the dominant setback is 10 feet. And that's the secondary facade that you're seeing on Great Jones, 10 feet on Lafayette. And then 10 feet, we've repeated that 10 feet on the lot line. And I'll just walk around here, 10 feet on Great Jones, 10 feet on the lot line. And then what you're seeing is that is the facade that wraps to make the rear facade on both sides, this 10-foot setback. And then there is an indentation. That's what maybe is the hard part to read. And that has to do with getting a rear yard dimension that we have to have along the, because of this irregular footprint of the back. We have to have a fixed dimension here and here to any light and air windows. And then this is the footprint of the core. There's 2 elevators and 2 elevators. And so that's where you're seeing so the mechanical penthouse is this line, which is set back on the Great Jones and is set back on Lafayette, but it does align with the volume below right here. Is that adding up?
Commissioner Goldblum?
On this very plan, if you were to, is your footprint maxed out in both cases, or are you shifting volume up?
Let's see, our footprint is maxed out. I will say we could technically build a little bit here and still have the rear yard.
Right.
And so we could technically push, but it makes the depth of the units too great to have for those through units. And so this is a kind of maximum depth for the 2 units that is set there. But otherwise, we are also maxing out the zoning envelope. We're going up to 195 feet.
Right.
And so we've taken the 10-foot setback, and there are areas that I pointed out this is one area we could grow in the back, but it's depth of units. We could also grow back to the lot line on the east, and we could go back to the lot line on the north. And those are choices that we made to try to distinguish the upper volume from the lower volume.
Thank you.
Any final questions? Okay, not seeing any. I do want to note that we received testimony since the April 14th public meeting that we've shared with the commissioners in advance of this meeting, including letters from Historic Districts Council, Historic NoHo Alliance, New York Landmarks Conservancy, Victorian Society of New York, Village Preservation, including a campaign of 123 individuals, 40 Great Jones Corporation, and 16 individuals, all who were opposed to the application, and then 2 individuals recommending approval. So, as we've heard, I'm going to say a few words first. As we've heard, this project has been redesigned to be responsive to many of the concerns raised at the April 14th public meeting, and to address concerns about the monolithic singular reading of the prior proposal. It has been redesigned as 2 distinct but related buildings that are individually expressed with different color palettes and facade expressions. Many commissioners expressed concern about the step street wall massing, which has been eliminated, and the massing simplified as blocks and setbacks. Each building has been redesigned to respond to its respective street context, with the corner building taller than the mid-block building at the base and setback, and the bases and setbacks of each building are also differentiated in material and detailing. The rear elevations were redesigned to read clearly as 2 buildings and have been reorganized in a simpler way. And the rear elevations are now mostly set back from this lot line. And while I was not on the commission at the last hearing or public meeting, I was present and also watched the hearing and subsequent public meeting. And I'm going to start with my position on the application. I think that the starting point for our consideration is that this is a large parking lot at a prominent corner that historically consisted of a building of substantial scale. So I agree with many of the comments of my fellow commissioners at the last public meeting that this is an appropriate location for a substantial new building, and likely one of the very few sites left in the NoHo districts that could accommodate a larger building. This site is at the intersection of Lafayette Street and Great Jones Street, 2 wide streets. Lafayette Street has a different scale and character from many of the smaller streets within NoHo, and there are substantial buildings within the immediate visual context, most notably the Silk Building across Lafayette Street and other buildings of a comparable height in the historic district. There is also a historic precedent on the site for a significant difference in scale between buildings, and I believe the presence of a taller building on the site will not be an anomaly or disrupt the range and scale of the buildings in the historic district. And the question for me is, therefore, is not whether a large building can be appropriate here. I think it can. The question is whether the architecture sufficiently mediates that scale and relates the building to the district. And I think the redesign does do that. Redesigning the buildings as 2 distinct buildings has helped break down the massing and feel of the building. And I think the change in color and material change for the 2 buildings is successful. The 2-volume massing of a strong base and a substantial setback, which the commission has sometimes approved for other new buildings, including across the street, also helps retain a lower street wall and a blocky form that relates to many of the buildings in this historic district. And in addition, the building facing Great Jones has a shorter street wall and setback facade along Great Jones Street, which better transitions to the character of that street. With the modifications made by the applicant, I think the proposed building is comparable with the varied scale, materials, rhythms, and industrial character of the NoHo historic district and extensions and can appropriately complete this long vacant site. I'm going to start calling on other commissioners who were at the hearing too, and who were generally supportive of the approach, but had specific design recommendations. I'm going to start with Commissioner Ginsburg.
Thank you, Chair. I really agree with the chair and what she has said. I appreciate the effort that's been made to address our concerns. Breaking it into two buildings really helps, in my opinion. The uniform cornice height, which I could argue has pluses and minuses in this neighborhood with so many buildings with uniform cornice heights, I think is important. You know, as I ask the question, I might play with the setback color versus the base color, but you've studied that. And I think in general, one of the things that came through in your presentation is how much you've studied all the issues we raised, which I appreciate, and things that I had questions on may have been answered. I hope the planter boxes will be more visible. The other thing, I think the lot line setbacks really help too, and I appreciate that. So in a general, I can find this appropriate and appreciate the redesign to address our concerns.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master, or Vice Chair Master.
Thank you. Yeah, I generally agree with the other two commissioners. I think that, this is the largest vacant lot, I think, in this district. And I think that the two wide streets can accommodate a building of a certain massing. I would also note that this historic district does have buildings with a variety of heights and different architectural styles. And as Aaron had said, it also has a history of incorporating new buildings with contemporary architectural styles. In the previous, when you first presented this, I think my biggest comment was that the way it had been designed and presented, the scale was just massive. I think you had a large red presence that took up what seemed like most of the block. And when you divided it into two separate buildings, as you have here, I think it really successfully, for me, reduces the visible presence of this. I think it was very successful in making it two separate buildings, and also changing the color so that you have one red building and a contrasting gray building, which have related styles but are separate. I also like how you have, given a little transition in the middle with the three-story portal door. I think that's very successful for me. I also like the design element of a base building and a setback. I think that makes it, it also helps to reduce the presence and the scale of the building. And you've also shown that in this district, this is another architectural element that has been used several times. So overall, I think that you've done a great job in addressing my comments, and I can find this appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Again, a very interesting application. And I do want to commend the applicant for really listening to us at their last presentation and really making a big effort to relook at their design approach in terms of massing and presence on these two street corners, or these two important streets. I think we've already indicated that we feel, or I did, that I expressed the sense that it was appropriate to add this type of square footage here how it was implemented, how it was strategized was where we had some questions. I really do appreciate the history of the district and understanding that large-scale commercial buildings had and were built in this district. And it seems like now we're at a time where the city's needs have shifted more to a residential need for larger bulk. And I do always consider that, especially in this case. I also understand and appreciate the fact that getting the bonus areas, this is a very applicable receiving site, and there are a lot of sites that can, in fact, take advantage of increased housing opportunities. So this is a unique case. I think every case we look at is unique. This one has very specific characteristics that are unique to this site. I think that the approach to massing, as my fellow commissioners have said, is a drastic change, and I think a change in the positive. In fact, when I look at the current design, it makes me feel like it's not now 2 buildings, it's 4. And that makes a difference because the sense of massing has sort of broken it down into different pieces. And I can relate to a corner mass that's large here on the corner of Lafayette and Great Jones, and how that might relate to masses such as 399 Lafayette, which is Astor Wines, which is a very large monolithic block mass, maybe lower, but definitely large in terms of mass and in scale. The Silk Building on the other corner, as well as 354. So these are 354 Bowery. These are sort of the neighboring buildings that I look at that are in an immediate context and give us a sense of how this might sit in that existing condition of mass buildings. I think that the approach is successful. I think that by breaking the mass and doing the setback, the street front facades feel more in keeping with the range. It is definitely on a larger size, but I don't think it's completely out of range with some of the historic masses around in terms of building facade, street wall. I do think that the setback from all sides is very successful, and I appreciate the applicant taking the comment to heart, giving those facades much more frontal looks from every direction. I think really greatly improved the presence of this proposal. It was the largest mass, the tall piece, and it felt more like the rear facade on 3 sides. And that setback on all sides, I think, has helped the sense of scale here and pushing it back into the actual experience of walking down the street. I could imagine that these taller setback buildings are in fact a block away. It's the context that you see density here, and the respect to a smaller height that is at the street face that I think actually works. Let's see, I have a lot of thoughts. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think that, again, the presence on Lafayette and Great Jones, on Lafayette is the narrow facade, but Lafayette is definitely the larger street and has a lot larger scale existing buildings on it. Great Jones was more of the question initially for me. I feel that the breakdown and change in character of elevation on Great Jones is greatly appreciated, and the articulation and care and craft in the facade detailing is also appreciated. I think it will be a very handsome facade. I do ask the applicant study that gray color. At times in the renderings, it feels a little light green or a little too light, but the precedent images indicated a more of a gunmetal gray or pewter gray that I think would look quite handsome with the red terracotta they've chosen. I like the texture on the facade. Minor variations and play in depth, I think, give the facade a sense of scale as opposed to just large mass. It does break down. The horizontal elements on this corner are also appreciated. I think that the horizontality reading is going to help with the scale on this corner piece, and does address some of the horizontal reading that I see on Lafayette Street. The 25-foot breakdown in plan and vertically sort of expressing very tall penthouse type scale, I think works, especially if I look at Lafayette here in the neighboring building. There is some sense of relationship with otherwise would have felt completely out of scale with that small red brick building to the side. You can look at carefully. I hope that the applicant just studies that that reveal doesn't appear too minor and is actually seen as a distinct break between those divisions. And I appreciate the break up at the cornice so that it does continue all the way up. I think that when you look up, you will notice that. You'll notice the break in that cornice there, and I think that helps the scale. Yeah, I think that in general, I'm quite happy with the revisions. I think that the setbacks on all three sides have done something that has been successful in two ways. It addresses, to me, the street level much more successfully in scale, and it also, in some ways, slims up this proposal in a way that makes the tower element, because this face is probably only like 30 feet, is not that wide. It does give it a slight slimming effect, which I think definitely is a positive in the sense of mass here. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
I want to thank the applicant for presentation and the level of just detail and articulation in what they were presenting. I think for me, the two big things are obviously, as mentioned before, the color change, material change, as well as the elimination of the stepping at the facade. I think those changes were major improvements in terms of how they addressed all of the concerns that myself and some of the other commissioners had previously. I think with establishing this same plane or setback level of the base building, it really grounded it and gave it a presence that made it easier to relate to the context on both streets, especially just Great Jones. I think the material change or color of changing the material allowed this clear delineation between both buildings that I think also felt like it reduced the scale because of the same color being divided up. It just makes the building not feel as massive as it was before. As previous, I'd really appreciate the level of detail in the facade, the articulation. From a distance, you can't tell, and I think that even adds more value to it as you get closer to the building. You see all of the various details that were implemented. I think, yeah, I also really like the entrance, which at first I think can seem confusing, but it's still playing back to this being one structure in terms of its entrance, but it does give it this presence on Great Jones that I guess differentiates it, but also relates to some of the other buildings on the block with this kind of three-story entrance to their buildings. And then as well as I think Commissioner True talked about this slimming effect at the setback of the top portions of the buildings. I think that was really a really smart move, as well as kind of this separation of masses that I think really helped reduce the scale and made it not feel as big. And I think the subtle change of the floor heights was also a smart move. So without kind of repeating what everyone else said, I think it was overall a good project, and I think I can find it appropriate.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I mostly agree with most of my fellow commissioners. My problem is that I accept the colors. I think the gray and the red as two separate buildings work. And I accept the modern language. The issue I have, it's a good building. They did a good job. It's well done. It's just a limitation of thinking of modernism as not being able to capture the excitement of the existing buildings around it. For example, the proportion, 25 feet to 12 feet, the changes in proportion is subtle. I mean, you won't be able to see it. It's minimal. It's a minimalist design that we do today. If there was a way of taking this language and making it richer, kind of proportions of this red building and the proportions of the gray building be more differentiated, not having this entry that looks like a Park Avenue entrance to an office building, kind of defining it as a kind of, this could be an office building. It doesn't have enough character for me to be housing. It works, it's fine, it's good, but it doesn't go to the level that I think it could have gone to.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. I agree with almost everything everyone said, with one very important distinction. I think there's no question that the building, the design is improved, the color, differentiation, all that stuff. I totally agree. For me, though, the scale is still incorrect. And I think that the project emerges from a misread of context as we've normally interpreted it. I think that it's a basic principle of the Landmarks Commission and the Landmarks Law that we have often exercised the right to not feel bound by zoning, but to say that zoning is one standard and appropriateness is a different standard, and that sometimes that's going to mean that you can't max out on your zoning in any number of situations that we've seen over the years. I think we've seen, this is our third big project that we've seen in this month, where large buildings that are taller than their context, as that word is normally interpreted or has been interpreted in the past, has been placed before the commission. And in the other two cases, we approved it, and I agreed with it because of the specifics of the context in which those buildings found themselves. This is the third case also where the argument has been put forth that we're in a new era. We're in an era where housing is an emergency, and we need to reckon with that, where zoning has changed to reflect that, and that in earlier eras of the city's development, zoning has driven what became significant portions of the city over time. For me, I recognize all of those, and I think that those are all correct ways to think about bringing historic districts into this new era. But I think that it has to be done in a balance with grappling with the notion of context as it's been developed over the many years that the commission has used that term. And I think that in this case, the context is pretty clear. The building hangs its hat on 770 Broadway, which is 220 feet tall. That building is 4 or 5 blocks to the north. I don't consider that the immediate context of this building. And I don't think that if we look at other examples of where context was used as a determinant of scale, I don't think that a building 4 blocks away is considered relevant for a determination of context. I think the most proximate building upon which one could make such a determination would be the Silk Building. The Silk Building is 151 feet tall. This building is 195 feet tall. I think that the notion of a block building with a visible blocky rooftop addition or volume is an appropriate element in this district. And I think the applicants have shown that such buildings have been built under commission approval in the district, and I think that those were wise decisions. I think here, though, the rooftop, the high-rise elements are out of scale with those other buildings, the ones that they showed us, the modern buildings that have been added on mostly on Bond Street. I think that they're out of scale with the building to the south that had a 4-story rooftop addition. I think here, it's like Stephen said, it's 4 buildings. The rooftop elements don't read as rooftop elements to a blocky building. They read as new buildings or secondary buildings. And I think that the scale of them is too big. And I'm trepidatious in saying that because I know the pressure is on to let people max out because we're in an emergency. But I think that from a scale perspective, I can't back these buildings being this big. I think that they have to lop off 3 or 4 floors on the top.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Akwembe and Commissioner Chen, you weren't here at the last public meeting, but Commissioner Akwembe, I'm going to call you next.
I believe the applicant actually took to heart what the comments of the commission were. I greatly appreciate the strategy of actually breaking up just the site in itself as actually making it read as 2 buildings. I think it was successful. I guess I consider them more or less sibling buildings. They both have their own expression. Especially the West Building has a strong horizontal base in which the building sits on, while the East Building plays with the this portal at the entry, using similar materials, but varying in color and in combination. I think they do make 2 buildings that read well together, as well as read within the streetscape. I believe it was a good idea to push back all the sides of the tower, which actually makes them read separately as well, which further helps to break down the mass. Overall, I can find it appropriate.
And Commissioner Chen.
Interesting discussion. I apologize. I wasn't here for the last hearing, so and I was also not. I think the other 2 cases that Michael Goldblum was referring to, I was recused as well. I think this is a thing. But, you know, I love this neighborhood. I walk past this quite a long time, especially to the west of Lafayette Street. And obviously, in the context here is that you have a empty lot for almost 100 years. There are obviously 2 great contexts. One is Great Jones Street, and one is Lafayette. And I think that compared to the previous rendering that I could see is obviously the design has been modified from one massive building and to what Commissioner Chu has just said about reading as there's 2 or 4 buildings. I think that on the Great Jones side, obviously on the base, so-called the base building is obviously that is more successful, although I do question the verticality of the gray building. On the Lafayette Street side, I'm less troubled than the commissioners on the you know, the stepping down of the setbacks on the original design. I think the volume is clearly the proportion and the scale is clearly the issue, because, you know, you have you know, because the site, historically, this area before the Lafayette Street got cut through is obviously that this is a commercial area, to blend it in with the manufacturing uses and all the different uses in this area. So the change is obviously now that the imposition of a residential need, and I think the articulation is and how you carve out just the position of the different massing is the key. And I think that what the applicant has done correctly is obviously you need to go into the details by, you know, having the human touch of the terracotta and all those details to help soften it and reduce it. But I think that to the degree possible, that is on the texture treatment, on the materiality. However, volumetrically, I would say that, you know, I do not know how to play designer in this case. I'll break up this mass, and obviously, given the constraint that is being imposed upon. But, you know, so it is not an easy decision for the commissioners. I can see that there's tremendous need. Well, we somehow always fear density, right, in the city. That's why we're in quite a bit of trouble in terms of housing needs. But obviously is the greatest successful urban design model is Rockefeller Center. It has the highest density, but because you break it up into the different massing, the rooftop gardens, you know, the murals, the all the texture. So in this case, I'm kind of, you know, ambivalent in the sense that I wish I was here and see how the commission decided to ask the applicant to go with this, which you have done correctly on the Great Jones side by breaking it down. I think further can be done more, and I will highly encourage the applicant to still study how you can break up this massing or create different modules so that it doesn't read as a monolithic, huge volume. So in that case, you know, I think you have the votes, but that's my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for all of the thoughtful comments, and appreciate that there's some concern about still the size and scale and massing here. But I do think that we do have enough for a vote on this as presented. So Commissioner Ginsburg, could you
Yes.
please read the motion?
With regards to LPC 26-07016, 375 Lafayette Street, NoHo Historic District. A parking lot application is to construct 2 new buildings. I note that the NoHo Historic District Extension Designation Report described the historic district as including buildings of varying height and building types, ranging from small residential buildings to large institutional, commercial, and civic buildings, representative of the layers of development and mixed use. I further note that the Commission has approved new buildings on several empty lots in this historic district, and other lots were developed just prior to designation, with many of these buildings exhibiting a wide range of design and materiality. I further note that in the 19th century, this site was densely developed with a variety of independent buildings and no open space, including a large masonry building on the corner. I recommend approval, finding that the existing site is currently used as a parking lot and contains no significant architectural features, and that the new building or pair of buildings on this lot will reconstitute the presence of a built-out block with varying street wall heights and once existed at this location. that the large size of this site and the developer's program for 2 buildings with separate elevator cores presents an opportunity to break down the scale of this large development into 2 different but compatible designs. That from many views within the historic district, historic buildings are seen in context with historic and contemporary tall buildings located both within and just outside of the historic district, and therefore the presence of a taller building on this site will not be an anomaly or disrupt the range and scale of the buildings in the historic district or call undue attention to itself. That the eastern building will feature a shorter street wall and setback facade along Great Jones Street, creating a transitional device between the corner where taller buildings exist and the smaller scale mid-block buildings. That the inclusion of the setback higher up on the buildings create dominant and subordinate portions of the design primary facade that assist in moderating the scale of the buildings as implemented on several contemporary buildings in the historic district, including some directly across Great Jones Street and nearby on Bond Street. That the consistent pattern of vertical piers and fenestration on the street facade is keeping with repetitive detailing and fenestration found at historic and contemporary buildings within the historic district. That use of granite, metal, extruded terracotta are in keeping with both the traditional and modern materials and finishes of the buildings found at the range of building prototypes within the historic district. That the variation in color, finishes, profiles, details, composition between the 2 buildings will create a distinct visual dichotomy, and the variation in material will help break down the perceived scale of the buildings as a whole. That the transition between the more detailed terracotta extrusion at the base street wall and the simpler metal cladding at the setback facades allows the setback volumes to recede and have a secondary presence. That the use of simpler brick and metal cladding on the north and east secondary facades is in keeping with materials and finishes often found at secondary facades of buildings within the historic district, and will give these portions of the building a secondary presence in view from public thoroughfares. That the triple height entrance, which serves both buildings, is commensurately prominent for a building of this scale, along with the integrated planters at the spandrels above, work to further break up the repetitive module of the large street wall facade. That the scale and detailing of the storefront on Lafayette Street and Great Jones Street, including large display windows paired with entrance doors, masonry surrounds, and decorative metal grills, will harmonize with the ground floor treatment of buildings in this historic district in terms of proportion, configuration, and materials. That the metal entrance canopy and vehicular entrance on Great Jones Street will be simply designed and typical in terms of scale and placement. That the rooftop bulkhead and mechanical equipment screening will be simple in design, material, and silhouette, and comparable to utilitarian rooftop accretions found on other large buildings throughout this historic district. And that the proposed development of 2 large buildings on this site will not diminish or detract from the special architectural and historic character of the NoHo Historic District Extension.
And Vice Chair Master, can you second the motion?
Second.
And Mark, can you call the vote?
Chair Savage,
Aye.
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Abstain.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Ikwembe. Pardon? Aye. Commissioner Jefferson,
Nay.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
Okay, with that's let's see, that's 6 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 abstention. The motion passes.
Okay, we are running very behind schedule. And I think since our lunch is here and we're close to the time that we were planning to break for lunch, we're going to just go ahead and break for lunch now. So I would ask everybody on, oh, and I should say to the applicants, thank you very much, and please continue to work with staff. Sorry. So we're going to ask everybody on Zoom to please leave so that you don't have problems returning after lunch. And it is now 12:25, and we're going to try and return sharp at 12:55.